This week, we're going to talk about categories. That's right. One of our favorite topics that we've been discussing lately is categories. So it's going to be awesome. Then we're going to talk about startup and security notes of interest, all kinds of fun articles that Michael has put together, including Get Started Stops Users. Welcome to the era of decentralization. 3 ways to change your audience's perceptions. Raise successful kids. Richard Branson says to let them fail. Golden nuggets that will improve your sales efforts. In our other startup security and notes of interest, that was our startup articles and discussion. Someday I'll get this right. We're going to talk about Facebook's new pitch show, Quadium, ForcePoint, and Anonium Labs, and Juniper makes an acquisition. All that and more on this edition of Startup Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Startup Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team's skills up to date. IT Pro TV's team solution provides group pricing and access to their supervisor portal. You'll gain full control over your team's training schedule, see individual and group analytics, and more. IT Pro TV does IT live every day, so you know you're getting the most current IT training. Go to itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Welcome everyone to Startup Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. This is September 1st, 2017, and this is episode 53? 53, sorry, the teleprompter said 54. It is in fact 53. I have with me on the lines via Skype, Mr. Michael Santarcangelo, the beach bum himself. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I think everybody else is getting ready for their kids to go to school, and mine are already in school. So it's great because now the people that are still enjoying the beach are making the end of their plans, and the beach gets a little quieter, but we still have beautiful weather and palm trees, and life is good.
Nice. Also on the lines via Skype, Mr. Matt Alderman is here. Matt, welcome to the show.
I almost got the trifecta this week. If I weren't in downtown Denver yesterday, it would have been perfect. And my kids have been in school for like 3 weeks, so this is nothing.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it's a good week, right? The three of us, this is our second show, all three of us.
It is, yeah.
Paul,
and if
didn't even
you and I were available
yesterday,
we could have done the other show.
That's right.
Sorry, we're just making some equipment changes here, testing out some new equipment. Didn't go as well as I had hoped. Anyway, the teleprompter was not working either. We have some announcements. itpro.tv/startup security. That's right. Make sure you visit our fine friends at IT Pro TV and sign up for the supervisor portal. That's right. Your employer can sign up for an account. They can assign training modules. They can track your progress through the training materials. All that is available from IT Pro TV. And Sans Pentest Hackfest, November 13th through the 20th. Use the discount code HACKFEST17. Get $300 off the 2 days of talks that happen at the Hackfest Summit, which will have all kinds of fun stuff, including one of my presentations, which will be awesome. Coinapalooza, Cyber City, missions, as well as Security Weekly will be there doing videos and having fabulous prizes to give away. So make sure you check us out. Alrighty. We're going to talk about categories. Where do you guys want to start? I've been, I guess I'll just start and give a little bit of my background. I had mentioned to Michael, if in business, when you want people to think of a solution to a problem, what do you recommend we do? He's like, oh, you need to go read the book, Play Bigger. I'm like, oh, Okay. And then I was like, wow, you were spot on with your recommendation, Michael. And of course, that book has helped me actually change the way that I look at security today and in business, I think. And really helps define. I think it's something I've always thought of, like what a category is and who are we used to call them market leaders. Right now, they're category kings. So it really helped put a lot of context around that. So, Michael, Matt, just kind of opening thoughts on Play Bigger and some of the category stuff. You folks read the book way before I did. I was late to the party.
Well, Matt probably could have written the book with all the experience he's got. All I'll point out that was interesting to me is if you look at the way that humans operate, one of the things that I've looked at in security, right? If you give me 1 second to take it slightly differently, we've talked for years about information classification. And if you come from a military background, you either understand it or at least have adhered by it or tried to. The thing is, we're human-wise, we're wired for categorization. And if you dive really into it, it's looking at all these ways that we compare like things, and we look at learning and systems, and there's a lot of interest in why it's categories and not classification. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we try to do when you're actually in a security space with people. Say, look, categorize stuff. Don't worry so much about classifying it. Well, when it comes to categories, when we look at businesses and things, we start thinking about how we run our business, and there are certain things we need to do, right? We need to do marketing, and we need to do sales, and we need to do production, and whatever. And so what happens then is that we have categories. And then within the categories, we have subcategories. And the idea then, when we look at it, is how do we position ourselves so that somebody else looks at it and says, oh, I have that problem, and I already have budget for that. I've got budget, or I know I need to spend on that, or I'm looking to figure out how to solve that problem in that space. And so we start to do these categories. What I found fascinating about the book was that what they said was, if you don't really fit a category, yeah, cool, create your own. Mm. And that feels counter to a lot of people who've been into it. And the really big thumbnail sketch was, look, we used to tell people you don't have to do user design, but you do. And now you're looking at the experience of the design. Well, you know what? You can design your own category. And we've seen some pitfalls in that, and I think we'll probably get into some of those types of things. But so what's interesting about it is a lot of companies have spent time and money going to analysts and saying, look, this is where we should be in a category, and this is where we want to get positioned. And that ostensibly helps them get traction in the marketplace, right? Because they're the market leader, they're the category king. And what this book says is, yeah, you don't have to play by that rules. And I'm actually going to be curious to see how that plays out. I think when we see like the unicorns, right, the Ubers of the world, mm-hmm. that works out really well. I think for some other people, it maybe doesn't work as well as they'd like. But I mean, Matt's actually helped people figure this type of stuff out. So right. I'm curious, Matt, what would you say going into it?
Yeah, so I think the thing that you nailed to me is define the problem. Customers are looking for solutions to problems, and category design, or what, however you want this to kind of transcend, you have to start with the problem. You have to be able to articulate the problem, and you have to define your point of view on that problem to start to build that category. And I think what most people do is they design a category, and we'll get into this a little later, without really understanding sometimes the problem, their value yep. to the customer, and then yep. defining the category, right? Kind of doing it from the bottom up instead of the top mm-hmm. down. Everybody's read the book and they're like, oh, we got to design a category. So I'm going to make up a category before I do some of the other hard work that has to be done, I think, and then go to the analyst and say, we're in a new category, right? I do agree. Most of the analysts are kind of backwards looking, right? They're defining their market segments and categories based on requests they're getting from customers. But if the customers don't know they have a problem yet, or they don't understand that there's a technology that solves it in a different way, those categories don't typically come from the analysts themselves. They'll come from the companies. And I pulled a few examples of some of these because I think they will start to shape the way we think about how do we do a better job of defining the problem for customers. Our value to the customers is part of that overall category definition. Because if we don't do that well, it won't matter. They're still not going to buy.
Matt, can we start with what I think is a very simple example in the energy drink space? That's the one where if I'm explaining category design to people, that's where I kind of start. Because I think it's a very straightforward, easy to understand example.
The 5-hour energy example.
And I don't know if you guys have done energy drinks. I'm kind of way too old to do energy drinks now. I think all three of us are too old for energy. Like our doctor would be like, "No, your blood pressure is way too high. Do not touch any of those energy drinks." Right?
The only way we do energy drinks is with vodka because we have to counteract all the caffeine.
But back when I used to drink energy drinks. And a lot of people, that in security, you're trying to do that overnight coding kind of thing, or you were doing the overnight coding kind of thing, and you got to be fresh in the morning. We would drink energy drinks. And the thing with energy drinks is, I think anyone who's having an energy drink can attest to this, is when you drink those 16 ounce or 24 ounce or 32 ounce, God forbid, energy drinks, there's a ton of sugar and other crap in there, and you drink the whole thing, and you're awake, but man, you feel horrible. Like it's a terrible feeling to consume that much sugar and all of the carbonated beverage. Like my stomach's turning just thinking about it. And I can't remember the guy's name, was like, well, people want a boost of energy to stay awake, but they don't want to feel crappy and have to drink this gigantic can of fizzy horribleness. So I'll come up with an energy shot. And before he released 5-hour energy, there was no concept of an energy shot, right? A Red Bull was the smallest denominator, but it wasn't an energy shot. It was still an energy drink. He created an entirely new category that was the energy shot and branded it 5-hour energy. And he addressed the problem of, you want to be awake, but you don't want to feel horrible. It was straightforward. It was clear cut. Now, he did get endorsements from other people and things like that, and he did have some really good marketing. He also, so that's the whole thing with category design, is you can't just go say, hey, I'm going to go create a new category and I'm going to be successful. Like, obviously, your product has to work, and you have to do all those other marketing and sales things around it. It was also put in the convenience store, right at the register kind of thing. So there was a lot of strategic things that went behind it. But I thought that was a very good kind of simplistic example of creating a new category.
Yeah, and when you think about category design in general, the goal is it sets the long-term strategy for the company, or it should. Mm-hmm. And that means you start there because then you have to do a number of things to execute on it, right? So you talked about some of them. The product has to deliver on whatever it is you just defined. Right. And if the product doesn't deliver and there's no alignment to the roadmap, you can go out and design any category you want. Mm-hmm. If you can't deliver on it with the product, you're sunk, right? You have to go out and align all your messaging and all your marketing campaigns to reinforce that message and educate people in the market. So a lot of people will build a really good product, don't get me wrong, but they haven't gone through this yet. So they're like, well, what problem are we really solving? Mm-hmm. They kind of know it, but they haven't articulated it well enough. So the work that I've been doing lately is actually backing some of these companies up to say, wait a minute, let's start here. Once we understand this, then I can better align your roadmap. Now I can build your website. Now I can drive your marketing campaigns. Now we know which events make sense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People are executing without the strategy behind really what is that thing that you want to get out in the market and what's your value back out. So it's interesting, right? So the 5-hour energy drink's interesting because of the way that it came to be. And then that gave him the way to execute on that strategy to actually make it very successful.
Yep. Did you have more examples, Matt? Because there's other ones that I really like in there as well.
Yeah, there are. What I tried to do, look, this is all the rage right now. And a lot of people are doing it or talking about it and trying to figure it out. And so I kind of went back to our industry a little bit, mm-hmm. security, and said, okay, who's doing this well and who isn't doing it well? And I thought it would be interesting to maybe point out a couple of those because I think it will hit home a little bit. We talked about one of the companies earlier in the week on Enterprise Startup Security Weekly, Duo Security. Mm-hmm. And Duo Security's kind of the best way to describe their category, sometimes it's hard to extract these out, but if it's not front and center on your website and I got to go dig for it, you're not doing a good job of right. it. But it's this concept of trusted access. Their category to me is trusted access. And it's this ability to have easy multi-factor authentication, works anywhere, creates this trusted access category. Could they do better in bringing more of the value to the front in their website? Yeah, I think they could. But as we all kind of recognize, Duo's a leader in that space, and they've kind of carved out their kind of category, this trusted access category. Is, hey, that's where we're playing, right? So I thought they've done a pretty good job. There's not a lot of good examples out there. The identity guys are the ones that seem to be kind of extracting that out a little better. I pulled another one, startup company called CallSign. They just took a round a few weeks back. I think we talked about that one, I think, a few weeks ago as well. But this concept of let me pull the exact term because I don't want to mess it up. But I like the concept. Intelligence-driven authentication. And what they do is really look at various factors, primarily off the phone. So they're looking at, different activities of how you use your phone and how you're walking. And it's all these kind of interesting parameters that come in.
And what's interesting, Matt? Hiram from Endgame came on our show several months ago. And he's a data scientist for Endgame, in charge of their machine learning and all of that stuff. And he says, one of the interesting problems that machine learning could solve potentially is understanding all those factors about maybe what happens on your phone and authenticating people. He said,
right.
He said it's getting close, but he wasn't sure quite where we were. I couldn't remember exactly where we were. I was kind of skeptical that could happen. He was like, well, from a machine learning standpoint, it's actually a pretty good use case.
Yeah.
And there's a company to it.
Yeah, and CallSign's doing it too, right? They're looking at all these things and saying, wait, yeah, that looks like you. So I'm just going to give you access. I'm not going to ask for any additional tokens or anything else. I'm just going to make it easy for you to get in. But if we see weird activity on the phone or we don't see certain other activities, then I'm going to ask you more information because maybe somebody else has your phone and we don't want to give you access. That's a really cool concept. And
it's also terrifying, isn't it?
It is kind of terrifying.
It is.
How easy it is to profile us. Let me point something out because I was just looking at it. I love this as an example. And I'm looking at their website, and you're right. It's front and center, intelligence-driven authentication. That's really cool. But then you go down, and it says the challenge, and then it has a solution. And what's interesting is it's missing the impact. And that always drives me crazy because we're so quick in this industry to jump right to the solution. Like, I'll give you 2 paragraphs on the challenge, but hey, I'm the solution. And where, without going any deeper, where they can do better is they didn't fall in love with the problem. And that's what you were just talking about, Matt. It's tell me the problem, right? Either show me that there's a problem that I have that I didn't think was solvable, right? It's an intractable problem, and you're going to elevate me. You're going to make it so that I'm better and I can solve it. Or convince me I didn't even know it was a problem. But P.S., I totally have that problem, and gosh, that'd be fantastic. And I think when it comes to authentication, people have been cranking about it for 20 years. They're cranky about it now. There's not a day that goes by somebody's not bitching about passwords or talking about something they need to do better or how much they hate it or what. It is a topic of conversation, so it's great. And I think it's interesting because they looked at it and said, all right, the challenge is there's data breaches and multi-factor authentication is no longer enough. That's the challenge. Maybe you guys would see it differently. I feel like they've missed an opportunity here. Tell me what the real problem is, and push on it a little bit, and then offer me a solution. But the other thing I find too, and I find a lot of people get this wrong. If you can identify the problem for me, I always say you need to isolate and elevate that problem. And so what that means is, can you ask it as a question? And the reason I say it's elevating it is in human conscious, right? We have this need for categorization. Well, we also have this need to solve problems. Right? It's that primal brain kicks in. And if you can phrase something in the form of a question and it somewhat matches the language and way I'm already thinking about a problem, you can try to avoid it and good luck, but unless you're really good at meditation or you've got enough other things distracting you, you lock onto that and you're like, okay, what are they talking about? Because I have that problem. I'm really interested. And that's why when we talk about being able to answer what problem, you've got to isolate that and elevate that so that when I hear it, I'm locked into it. At least if I have that problem, I'm locked in. And then you've got to show me some of the consequences. And this is what people, I think, miss. Your solution is just the inverse of the problem. So if the problem is multi-factor authentication is no longer enough. The solution is you need something that's better. You need something that's adaptive. And they start right out with, well, we're the solution. No, tell me what the solution is. Then you can tell me how, right? When you talk about value, how you're the valuable solution, how your solution is valuable and the impact that you create. And I find that's kind of fascinating. I don't know. Maybe you guys see it differently, but that's when I always look at it. That's what I look for.
Yeah, this is a recent change to their website, by the way. I actually like the old one a little better. No, truly, I did.
Figures, right?
Here's what I like, right? I'm a keep it simple, stupid kind of guy, right? Look, if I can articulate the point of view in the category, then right under it, like without even needing to scroll, I want to see your value. I want to see how you structure the value. And then that will drive you to a solution, right? So I call them power positions, right? It's extracted from value. It's those statements that say, look, this is our point of view. Here's what we think the category is. And here's our 3 pillars of where we believe our strength is in solving that, right? But not go into the solution necessarily. And I can articulate the problem through the point of view statement, I think, pretty efficiently. And so in an older version of their website, they actually did a little better of that. But I would want the value here. Like, give me those power positions why intelligence-driven authentication is the answer. And then, because customers, when they see that, they're going to be like, wait, I need to do that. And they want to learn more. And as soon as they do that, you're going to drop them to a solution page that's going to give them more detail, and then you're going to figure out how to get them to try or buy. If you can't get a customer there in 2 clicks on your website, it's too much. It's too complex. And that's why I like this kind of bring those elements to the top, make it really easy for people when they go to your website to see it and go. But this was a recent change, but I like the category. I like the POV. No,
I think
I'd love to extract out their value a little more.
No, I completely agree. You know, too, I want to amplify what you just said. It's 2 clicks. It's crazy, but in the late 90s, we knew it was 2 clicks. Retail, 2 clicks. Anything more than 2 clicks, cart abandonment was in sky high, 70%, 80% cart abandonment.
Exactly.
It hasn't changed. So it hasn't changed.
I know. And if you go look at some of these websites, they're 14, 15, 20 pages of content. Nobody's going to read it all. I'm sorry. Humans are lazy. If we don't see what we want right away and click, and then get more attracted to click the next button, we're gone. We're bored, right? We're all done.
It's interesting with call sign. They could almost take the whatchamacallit. What is the example they use in the book? The online ERP, the customer thing. Salesforce, thank you.
Salesforce.
Where Salesforce had, software with like a big circle and an X through it. I mean, call sign could take passwords with a big circle and an X through it. And I mean, there's their, problem statement and some of their POV, right in one very simple graphic. It's not always that simple, believe me. I was listening to the audio version of the book. I'm like, that's awesome for Salesforce that they could distill it down in one graphic. Like, that is really powerful. But not everyone is going to have that simple of a problem definition and point of view, like almost rolled into one.
Yeah,
and keep in mind, too, the timing.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was going to say, just think about the timing. Think about when Salesforce came out. SaaS didn't exist, right? And one of the stories actually that I seeded for next week was the commoditization of SaaS, and whether that's good or bad. So tune in next week. We'll talk about good or bad. But the point to it is, at that time, right? So what they were selling, what's interesting is that doesn't really speak to their value, except for you don't have to have something on premise, right? So like it's almost like they attacked a feature that was dogging the industry as opposed to so it's just, yeah, you're right. I think it could work with passwords. By the way, people have tried that for the thing that drives me nuts is when people go, no passwords. What we have is 2 factors. So you start with a password. And I'm like, wait,
yeah, you just said no.
That's a password. Stop.
Right. Exactly. And so they have the ability to, I think, flip this on its head a little bit. The way I would have approached this, though, back to your point a little bit, Paul, was right. Salesforce could distill it into a single graphic. It's extremely difficult, right? I think for most to be able to do that. which is why, look, marketing's in the power of three. You better figure out your three strengths. And it's three things. It's probably three graphics. That's okay. You get three. So if you've got 5 listed on your website, you better figure out your strongest 3, because 5's too many. Human brains can't wrap their heads around it, which is why I usually do this very detailed kind of bottom-up approach. Not to give away too much of my secret sauce, because I've kind of combined some of the learnings over the years. But look, to me, it's pretty simple how you start. You have to articulate the problem clearly and simply.
Yep.
I think that's a challenge for most organizations. They can't describe the problem very easily or simply, where people understand it and go, "Oh yeah, I got that problem." You need.
By the way, that persists. All I was going to say is that persists. I mean, like the thing that I find fascinating, because that's where I spend my time helping people, is that persists if you're trying to do a value prop because you're a vendor. That persists if you're in the enterprise and you've got 100 things to focus on. And we say, cool, what's the most important? What's the problem you really need to solve? Security? No, dude, we gotta. So what's interesting is, it's too broad, but it's everywhere. And that's actually why it's so important if you're a vendor today. You got to narrow that stuff down, because nobody else is going to do it for you. They don't have the time. They don't have the energy to do it. If you don't do it and you hope, I'll just throw 20 pages out there, they'll go through it. They'll figure it out on their own. No, they won't.
They'll go on to the next one.
Nope. They'll add 21, then 22, and then 23. Right. So, look, if you can't articulate the problem, that's a challenge. Number 2, you better have your unique point of view on how you solve that problem.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're not doing it better or different than anybody else, which means you can never be a category king if you take the thing to heart. Then start to extract your value of how you think you can solve that. Then define your category. Because if you create a category that doesn't align to your power positions, and that then don't align to your solution offerings, and then don't align to the product that you're delivering in the market, you just missed everything.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why, the book makes it seem like, well, all you need to do is category design. And some people, I think, could listen to the book, read the book, and come away with that. And what Matt's saying is the right answer, which if you really listen to the book is what they're saying, that it's not easy. It's not like, I have a company, I just need to find a category and I'm going to be successful. Like, no. So many people have tried to do that, even in our security industry, and just failed miserably because they've gotten it backwards. They haven't started, as Matt's saying, like from ground zero, what problem do we solve, and done all that work to build it up and then say, okay, this is our category. And I think that's a really important lesson for those listening and watching the show. That we're talking about category design and being a category king, right? Uber being the category king. Apple creating 3 different categories, which I think is one of the most monumental achievements in any technology company, in any CEO of a technology company, and Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, 3 different categories when he came back to Apple. They were kings in all of them, with the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. And they still are to a certain extent, right? And I think, criticized, like, why do I need a tablet? And all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, that's a problem I didn't know I had. And they were like, oh yeah, right. no, this is
there it is.
You need this. I'm like, oh, okay, I need that.
I'm going to switch gears, though, and build on what you're just saying. I mean, think about the background that both of you have and the successes that you've had. Okay, now you've got your category. Now you've got your point of view on the problem. Oh, and so you're good? No, you like, what I loved about the book was it talked about the lightning strikes, and you've got to march toward that, and you've got to focus on that. And we see a lot of people go, okay, we did this exercise, and we have this category, and we put it up on the whiteboard, and we all voted, and we gave it thumbs up. So we like it. So that's our new category. Okay, cool. So what are you doing to reinforce that? Oh, nothing. I mean, what we're doing is working. That's not how this works.
There's 2 types of campaigns in the book: strikers and pirates. You strike, right, to get the message out. You find those big events, but then you're a pirate. You leverage your competitors' news to spin them your way, right? These are all part of marketing campaigns that have to be executed after you build the category.
Yep.
You've got to get it out. You've got to go after every time your competition does something, you have to spin it to why you're doing it better or different. That's the whole pirate concept, and continually reinforce that. The biggest success of category definition is when somebody copies you.
Yes,
but
you need that.
You validated the category you defined.
They're validating the category by competition. So you absolutely need competition in your category.
Absolutely.
Yeah, by the way, right?
So when they
look at Uber.
follow that, de facto makes you the leader.
Right.
So that you have to do that.
And think about what they talk about too with category kings and their staying power, right? Uber is being trashed in the news. They've been going on a year now, certainly 6 or 8 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's far more than Target stated in news in terms of a security breach, and yet they're still the category king. They've got problems left and right, but new CEO says, we'll IPO within the year. We're good.
Well, Uber's got Lyft.
He said 18 to 24.
Well, Uber's got Lyft.
Oh, did he?
But
I thought he said year. My bad.
The way I look at it too is Uber's the king, right? Lyft is the prince. There's other players that are entering the market, and there's even that service for taxi cabs now, which is trying to copy what Uber did. But if Uber's smart and continues what it's doing, it's still going to be the category king, which involves, by the way, creating new categories. To go back to the Apple example, to stay king of that category, you have to, when you're not done, now you got to go create new categories with your newfound success.
Let's stay on Uber for a second. Matt, I'm curious your take on this. One of the things that I always thought was fascinating about Uber was they just started with, was it Uber Black Car? But it was one thing, right? I mean, like now you can get Uber Carpool and you can get Uber whatever, and you can still get the Uber XL, and you can get right. So there's a whole bunch of different stuff, and there's different pricing on it. But when they started, they were in one city or 2 cities or 3 cities, and it was it. Like you had to have a black car. It had to be like it was very tightly controlled. They did one thing. They only did one thing, and they only did it in like 2 or 3 cities, and then they added more cities. And then when they had enough velocity and momentum, they went, oh, okay, well, we can do this other thing, right? Does that matter then too? Like when you're building a category, I don't think you can try to be everything for everybody in the beginning. So then does your category need to be a little bit aspirational, and you can just kind of still nail it on one thing better than everybody else long enough to assert your position? How do you think about that, especially when it comes to like security companies thinking about stuff like this?
Yeah, so it's interesting because as I've been doing some of this, look, your category can be a little expansive of your capabilities from a product perspective. And you can start to sell the vision and start to build into the roadmap, but you can't go too far. So one of my recommendations is about every 12 to 18 months, you have to go through the process again. You don't just do it once, you stop and you're done. Depending on where you are in your roadmaps and in the growth of the company, every 12 to 18 months, you got to go through this again, I think. And the reason I say that is I don't try to put customers too far ahead of their skis. I really try to build a message that is differentiated, highlights their true values. They may still have to build out some features and capabilities, but we also start, when I'm sitting down with the CEOs, I'm thinking about, okay, what's your next category, right? What's the expansion from here? Where do you, if this is it today, think 12 to 18 months from now, what could it be, right? And we're not going to nail it 100%, but I want them to start thinking about the evolution of the category. And so there'll be that kind of thought process I think about, because if you build it too far out and you can't deliver on it, you just killed yourself. Nobody's going to follow you into a space you can't deliver on, right? You completely missed it. So you got to balance that, but know that there has to be another evolution of this, and then another one. The market's going to shift, so you got to adjust.
Does it have to be a wholesale change, or when you're thinking about the category, is it a subtle refinement of wording and therefore a point of view, or is it sometimes as simple as redefine what the category means? So the words are the same, but the way you describe the problem changes. Like when you're thinking about it and you're trying to look ahead, which of those is the most important to start thinking about?
Again, I go back to values. So as your product matures and you start learning from the customers and you start implementing new stuff, sometimes your value propositions start to shift. They start to mature. They start to expand, And again, you only get 3, you don't get 4, you don't get 5. So part of it is, okay, I just added this new capability that now becomes one of my value propositions. How do I adjust the other 2, right? And does that change your point of view slightly? Maybe. Does that change your category? Maybe, right? So I think it's a little bit of all of them, Michael. It's not just one or the other. You have to, again, root it back into those power positions to say, look, we've now evolved our strength in analytics. So what does that mean for us in our new point of view and to the category we'd previously defined? Should we update them?
So, Matt, explain for our audience the POV or the point of view, which comes up pretty often in about the middle of the book.
Yeah, POVs are interesting in that everybody kind of has their vision of how they should, right, have their kind of view on how they're going to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. And POVs are interesting because they have to be better or different than others trying to solve the same problem, right? So you have to articulate, what is my view of how you solve this? And it's an interesting exercise, because I've done this a number of times, to really extract out in a single statement, it's roughly a sentence, of what is, and again, if it's any longer than that, you lose people, right?
Gotcha.
So how do you extract out this unique, differentiated, or better point of view in a single statement? And that kind of sets the foundation in the alignment into those power positions. And that point of view can change as the market changes. There's nothing wrong with that. But you better articulate it better than everybody else. And I think that's the challenge, is when you look at most security companies, I'll give the generic example, endpoint detection and response. Mm-hmm. Who's differentiated in that space? Who has a unique point of view? They're all next-gen endpoint. They all just kind of meld together. If you want to stand out in the endpoint space, you better articulate a point of view different than next-gen endpoint security, because that's what everybody else says. Yeah. I'm sorry, but that doesn't resonate with me.
No, I agree. And going through this book has really made me realize a lot of things about analyzing the security industry, right? I think before I read the book or listened to the book, I was like, I had seen a lot of really poor design and implementation of new categories. I was like, yeah, it's usually like there's a security company that wants to say that they're solving a new problem or have a new solution and trying to create a new category. And I'm like, yeah, you're just not even in touch with reality. Like, somewhere, maybe even multiple points in that process, like something just fell down horribly and it fails. And I was of the opinion that creating a new category might be too risky for a lot of companies, especially at the start. However, what this conversation, in the multiple conversations the three of us have had, and reading this book made me realize is if you do it right and incorporate all of those elements that start with the problem you're trying to solve, that you can really be a player and a king of that category. And I think that's what, I think in my head now of the category kings, and kind of play this game when you hear about a company or a category, like, oh, who's the category king? Why are they the category king? What did they do effectively? And it's not just one or two, like there's a whole process, and put some context around that. Once you've gone through that process of creating what you believe is your new category, the way they recommended that you do marketing after that was pretty cool. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is they were like, their take on branding experts. I don't know if someone can put that kind of in a nice way about their take about branding and doing a branding exercise. They weren't very nice about that whole thing at all. It was expletives in there. Sometimes my kids were in the car. I'm like, knock it off. And it's usually when they were talking about branding, right?
Because if you look at the way most people do branding, it's they try to come up with a catchy slogan, right? Mm. They're not trying to represent something that you believe in, right? Then it goes back to the point of view. If you get the point of view right, you're saying this is what we believe about the problem. And let's take that a step further. If you're articulating these things properly, right? If you're articulating your point of view, it means you understand the problem. If you're articulating then the problem that you solve, right? So those two things are tightly coupled, and the value that you bring, and then I like to add in the impact, which could be a multiplier, very positive, or unfortunately in some cases it's a deselector. But the lesson in this is, assuming your tech works okay, or your solution works okay, those who define and declare and articulate the problem better, or I like to say translate that into understanding better, they win. They won because they didn't just, like if you just go out and you capture attention, but your stuff sucks, right? And we've already talked about that. Well, then you don't go anywhere. But you don't have to be your tech, you don't have to be Betamax, which most people still believe was superior to VHS. But yeah, it didn't work out. I know we always say, thank you, porn. You guys helped us with VHS. But regardless of the reasons for it, you don't have to have the best tech. And what we see a lot of times in startups, especially security startups, is they spend so much time on features. They forget about benefits. They forget about the experience of it. But more importantly, they don't explain to us where it fits. They don't explain to me why this is important. Why, right? Because value is also about priority. The way I look at it is, if you can identify the problem you're solving, you're giving me a focal point. And if you can tell me about value, you've elevated its priority in my world. And if you can do that properly enough, I'm excited. And that's why the impact for me, that's the qualifier. That's the yes, no. Well, focus on that, folks. And as we keep talking about, it takes time. It takes effort. You got to fight through it a little bit too. Like if you think, well, we got like 8 hours, we'll make it work. No. It just it takes longer than that. It's just and it's going to take iterations. Longer. And it's kind of like, we're not going to quote Art of War, but the first time you, as excited as you think you are, you go give that to real paying customers, they're going to validate that or invalidate that for you really fast.
Absolutely. Yeah, the process is not throw a bunch of executives in the room for a day and go fight it out. It's not going to work that way. It takes time, and then there's a fight. Because you've got a lot of opinions in the room. Ultimately, the CEO makes the final decision. Look, I don't make the category per se. I extract it. My job as a consultant is to extract it out of the executive team in a simple to easy understand way. And they're the ones that are going to say, no, that doesn't resonate. I like it this way. Okay, that's fine. My job is to kind of push you a little bit to think about things differently and extract that information out, structure it in a way that the rest of your team can use it to execute off of. And that takes time. It's not a one-day exercise in the boardroom, because there's a lot of prep that has to go in that. There's a lot of preparation that goes in. Yeah, ultimately you got to lock them in the room, and the last man standing, typically the CEO, wins, which is fine. But that it's part of the process, and unless you can rally everybody behind it, it's not going to succeed either, because you can't execute on something people don't believe in.
And that's an interesting point, Matt. I think one of the more difficult things of this process isn't necessarily creating the category. While that's very integral, right? You got to define the problem, talk about your unique point of view, have your value points. Then, if everyone does agree on that, I feel like it's easier to get to than the newer things or ideas that they had about actually changing the way you do marketing in order to create that new category. To me, that was one of the bigger takeaways from the book. Like, you get to understand category creation. I think it's more of a thing now. When I watch Shark Tank, I quote Mark Cuban, who was like, they're like, well, they're creating a new category. And Mark Cuban was like, that's a good thing. It was a positive thing for him because he gets it, right? But I think investors like that understand that if the company's even done an okay job in defining their problem, their point of view, their value, and creating a new category, then much of the work comes after that in the staying power in your marketing behind that. I think that's something a big investor like that, or someone with a lot of experience like a Mark Cuban, can bring to the table to make sure they sustain that. For a lot of us that have been marketing for a long time, that I think there's a lot of changes that have to be made.
Yeah, again, it sets the foundation for your marketing activities, whether they're ad campaigns, their webinar campaigns, their events, whatever they are. They all have to align back to that in some form or fashion. And if they don't, and I've seen this before, right? a webinar or a blog for the sake of a webinar or a blog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but again, if you're not pushing them into those value props, if every thing you do, whether it's a blog post or a webinar or an event, doesn't create an action into what you believe your value in solving the problem is, you've completely missed the campaign. Completely. So, yeah, it's great that you want to go out and do a bunch of campaigns, but what are you going to focus those campaigns on? This process actually helps you identify how to align your campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has to reinforce the category and the problem and the value. Yep.
And your point of view.
And your point of view. Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't mean to knock investors, but I'll tell you something I've seen in investors a lot, right? Because I work on a translation to it, is they're really quick to discount that you didn't do that work because they go, oh, well, you know what? I'm not one of your buyers. I'm not really in your space. So, okay, even though it took me 5 months and 15 phone calls and 3 in-person sessions to understand what you do, the market will react a lot quicker to it. I can't tell you how often I see that. It's absolutely astonishing to me. And then what happens is the founders do the exact same thing. So they'll say, well, I mean, we got investors, so obviously it's clear. And I go,
no.
How many meetings did you take? How did you explain it to them? And when you tell me, obviously it's clear, well, I mean, I admit I'm not smart, but I don't understand what the hell you're talking about. So how would anybody else? And so it's an interesting thing because I think that somebody like a Mark Cuban might see it, and there's obviously a number of other investors that see it, but it's one of those, it's the George Bernard Shaw quote, right? One of the greatest illusions in communication is that it actually took place. We think that we've articulated it. We think that we've done this, but we're so scared to test it. We're reticent to test it. We're reticent to see if it holds up on its own. And we just go, oh well, that's on them then. And I think what we're talking about is if you want to do this right, you've got to really get down into the weeds and articulate this, but you've got to do it in a way that separates the signal from the noise. You need to be the signal. People are inundated today with noise. People are disengaging at alarming rates. The attention residue is higher than it's ever been. I mean, my gosh, 20, 25 years ago, the average advice was, from a marketing perspective, you needed to have 6, no more than 9 touches before somebody formed an impression about what you do. Today, it's like 25 to 30. And to be fair, the last time I looked at this stat was probably 3 or 4 years ago. If you told me today it was closer to 50 touches, I'd buy it. By the way, if you think that means, well, then we'll just fire everything, like it's coming out of a blunderbuss, that's not going to work. You go back to Matt's point. Everything you do has got to be driven back to that point of view. That's exactly right. The category that you choose, the point of view, all those pieces, that's going to drive everything. And if you're consistent with that and it all lines up, people will eventually start to recognize you for that. And that's a fantastic advantage.
For sure. Any closing thoughts on category design?
One last one from me, right? It's so crazy now that every time I look at a website, every time I talk to a customer, I'm structuring it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, even if I go out and build an alliance strategy or I build some other work component, instinctively, I'm thinking about this and making sure it's clear because I don't know how to align the rest of the strategy to it. It's crazy. It's just something that's every time I look at a website, I'm starting to dissect it. Every time I talk to a customer about a consulting engagement, I'm like researching to dissect it because I'm like, if I don't understand this, I don't know how I can help you. It's just become a normal part of my thinking process now.
Right.
And that's what you want your CMOs doing every single day. It's what you want your executive teams thinking about every day in some respects, right? I know they got other things on their plate, but truly, if you're thinking like this, you're really trying to figure out how do I differentiate myself and how do I get above the rest of the noise to make this company successful? You should be thinking that way too.
Yeah, I think if you're building a startup or a company of any kind or have done that and are in the process of doing it, this book is a must read. Like, absolutely. It's called Play Bigger. We're going to try and get some of the authors on the show. I also think if you work in security today and it's your job to evaluate security vendors in any kind of capacity, whether you have purchasing power or not, if you're evaluating security vendors, this is a great read because you're going to like think in your head about all of the vendor pitches that you've heard, and I think have a more analytical view as to and be able to ask better questions when you're evaluating technology. Do you guys agree?
100%.
Definitely.
Yeah, one of the things Matt said a lot that I absolutely love. In fact, I was doing some writing on it this morning. Is structure. It's structure. And what people, like I've looked at communication and teaching communication for years, and people are like, okay, what kind of PowerPoint should I use? And I was like, don't start with PowerPoint. And I've had people go, no, that's how I start. No, don't. No, PowerPoint's a display mechanism. In fact, you should be able to present without PowerPoint. And what we want is substance. You know how you get the substance? Structure. Structure reveals substance. So if you start learning the structure of this type of stuff, then you can use it to build, but you can also use it to assess. And as Matt said, if you get that ingrained in you, then you look at everything and you're always asking, you're always thinking. But then what you also have is that great mental model. So you're talking to a customer and you can listen to what they say and you can structure it. You can, and then you can determine this is great feedback or this is an outlier. This doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. As opposed to people who don't have that structure, they don't have any sort of discipline to it. Somebody gives them feedback, they're like, okay, we should totally change everything because one person said this. What? Also, no. Mm-hmm. So no, I think everything that you guys have laid out, and there's a lot. If you go back, Matt has shared a lot of really awesome insights that if people just go back and take some notes, they'll be better off for it. No question about it.
Awesome. With that, we're going to take a short break, come back, and talk about some startup articles. So stay tuned.